This is 21st Century Reformation at 21stcr.org.
I learned some new and shocking things in these last few months, and I feel compelled to share them. I didn't know the scope of this Holocaust, with over 1 million babies being murdered each year. We are rapidly approaching 60 million dead babies since abortion was legalized. That would mean over 1,500 before noon today. If you haven't been utterly appalled by the 11 undercover videos exposing Planned Parenthood's practice of selling infant body parts, please view these so that you know what is going on. It is nothing short of trafficking in human organs, the butchering of tiny human beings, and the sale of their remains. And here's the thing. 75% of those women having abortions call themselves Christian. As Randy Alcorn says, for years, the pro-choice position has had a hotline to our brains. By reading newspapers and magazines and watching TV, we have all earned the equivalent of a doctorate in pro-choice thinking. The abortion mentality has so steadily and pervasively metastasized in our society that it has contaminated and infiltrated our culture, reaching every social institution that touches our lives. Abortion is the most important issue of our generation, the defining issue. And just imagine how many people have been employed by the abortion industry in the 43 years that abortion has been legal. Many of those people self-identify as Christian. It's not about choice. It's about what that choice is. Pro-choice for one means death for the other. Let's look at the facts with both reason and emotion. We must not say, this is not our war. This is our war. And this chart, should we really be shocked by the sale of body parts? Or is this the inevitable outcome when a society loses its moral boundaries? The question before the court in the case of Roe v. Wade was whether the so-called tissue of pregnancy had any constitutional rights or protection to it. The outcome in the case was based on the persuasion of justices that since the Constitution grants its rights and protections to all natural-born citizens, that babies not yet born did not have those rights. 5 of the 7 Supreme Court justices fell for this argument that the unborn child has no rights, not even the right to protection, not even the right to continue living. What a dreadful lack of knowledge about human development they displayed, as all of the biology textbooks of the time could have helped them to see the error of their ways. They did precious little research or verification for their argument that a fetus was not the moral equivalent of a baby. A minority morality began to be imposed on this nation. What would have been repellent to previous generations became the norm, a scene in which the strong dehumanize and kill the weak. An amazing paradox is that the best column on pro-life ever been written is by a pro-abortion advocate. How could such a thing be? It is because she is honest enough as a journalist to admit that after her abortion, she always has a ghost with her. And she also is honest enough to admit that a fetal death is a real death. I'm now at the bold 2/3 down the page, on the first page. There can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way in which it treats its children. And by the way, I have to tell you that polls show that more men are in favor of abortion than women. If we fail to protect the weak, we fail the litmus test, and our society will lose its soul. There is no more defenseless than the innocent child in the womb. There is no compromise possible here. No 80-20, no 50-50. It's all or nothing. One is either protected or one is not. The right to life is the most important God-given right that we have. And to deny it is to rob someone of that right which our Constitution promises us. Compelling interest is a legal term describing the responsibility states have to protect the lives of their residents. The book, Compelling Interest, has shocked me to my very core. It is the real story behind Roe v. Wade, an examination of the landmark Supreme Court case that made abortion legal. I hope to play for you some clips from the original recordings in the Roe v. Wade arguments from the National Archives, and in order to do so legally, I must read this sentence, that it was authored by Roger Ressler and published by Christian Audio. The destructive power of ignorance. Much of my material comes from the book Compelling Interest. What is so shocking is that the decision made as to the morality of abortion was made in ignorance. As you well know, this parallels the history of theology. I will not go into the gruesome details, but I do want you to be horrified at how this happened, and even more horrified that it continues. As you will see, theological fallacies are grim, but understanding how such a thing, such a travesty has come about will help us to right this horrible wrong. And in at least one abortion clinic, they set aside a special room, a cold storage freezer room for the remains from the abortions. And what's marked on the door are the letters POC, and it's meant to stand for products of conception. But the workers, the employees, know better, and they're more honest, and they secretly refer to this as pieces of children. The main message of author Ressler is that the logic necessary to legalize abortion on demand was utterly flawed, and that the greatest flaw of all was an appeal to ignorance. Randy Alcorn is quoted often in the book, and I've followed his lead in not writing as a religious zealot because the case can be argued on a logical, factual, and legal basis. It is my hope to equip anyone listening to be able to speak with authority to the wrongness of abortion. The question is ultimately about the value of human life and the taking of that life. Abortion on Demand, the Gospel of Choice. A profound quotation here, I think, from Ronald Reagan. I've noticed that everybody who is for abortion has already been born. Let me set the scene for you of Roe v. Wade, which brought us abortion on demand. The year's 1967 in Texas. Sarah Weddington was the pro-abortion attorney who devised, argued, and won the case of Roe. She had just graduated from law school at the top of her class. She'd had an illegal abortion. She wasn't married, and she was very ambitious. She was finding it hard to find employment, and she and friends had actually to search for someone to use in this case, as you can't bring a case without an actual plaintiff. They found Norma McCorvey, who played no active role whatsoever in the case. And I'm delighted to say that she is now pro-life and actively advocates for the reversal of Roe v. Wade. The defense consisted of attorneys Flowers and Floyd. As I read them, I believe that they both were of the opinion that Sarah Weddington never had a chance. This was her first case. They didn't seem to prepare or even feel the urgency to do so, and she did. She came to court anticipating the objections put to her, and she practiced her responses. She'd done a great deal of research and came thoroughly prepared, while the opposition seemed to think that being part of the Old Boys Network would work for them. They were at a total loss. Sarah Weddington was charging that the 1850s anti-abortion laws were unconstitutional. The state of Texas was defending them, or not. Justice Blackmun, who wrote the majority opinion, in later discussion, apparently said that basically those 7 justices would have given her anything she asked for. She was very impressive looking, and Justice Blackmun admitted that women were asking for this, so we just gave them what they wanted. Only 2 of the 7 justices dissented, but they still signed the majority report. Have you ever wondered what a successful abortion is? It is the intentional death of an innocent child. Otherwise, it's not successful. And if it were not alive, it wouldn't have to be killed. Have you ever wondered what the plan of Planned Parenthood is? Is it not the premeditated killing of an innocent child? Killing is not health care. And when you delete a child, you delete yourself as the parent to that child. Abortion is legal because babies can't vote. Again, Weddington argued that since the Texas law viewed the woman as the victim rather than a perpetrator, the fetus therefore cannot be the victim. Attorney J. Floyd had not done his homework. His lack of knowledge was damaging. He was asked whether there was any state that equated abortion with murder. He answered none. In fact, 18 states had prosecuted women for crimes of abortion. Whether the opposition was weak or lazy or simply inept, we don't know. But that repeated floundering helped to turn the tide for Weddington. A very important point was at stake. U.S. anti-abortion laws had been on the books since about 1850. It was important that the current justices understand what had gone before. Attorney Flowers, having no idea why the laws came into being, could only agree with Weddington that abortion had been a kind of common law liberty and that it was only for the protection of the mother that the laws were passed. Flowers was asked if the destruction of a person in the form of a fetus was legal. He agreed that it was, since he was unfamiliar with the history of abortion law. This was anything but due diligence, and it simply was not true. We've been made to think that abortion was not criminal in England and America before the 19th century, but a legal scholar and historian says this regardless of how many times these claims are repeated. However, they are not facts, they are myths. Could we have clip page 20, please? This is the author speaking about one of the justices.
Whether he was aware of it at this point or not, Blackman's history and logic were seriously flawed. Destruction of a person in the form of a fetus was never legal in Texas, nor in any state prior to 1973. The specific question of personhood was not addressed in abortion laws.
The term personhood was started by pro-abortion advocates when they finally were forced to concede the fact advanced by the pro-life people that an unborn baby is indeed a human being. So they changed their tune, saying that, well, the fetus may be a human being, but it isn't a person. This is another logical fallacy called moving the goalpost. The entire Roe v. Wade Supreme Court decision rested on this one word, personhood. These judges knew and admitted in their decision that unborn babies are living human beings. They denied that they are persons. And by the way, the ebook from which I quoted this is authored by Lynn Balzer, who is here today for the first time. Delighted to have you. Right, let's drop down to the bottom of that page. And could I have clips 23, 25, and 27, please?
Reading the 1857 annual AMA report.
This is on your paper, the first quote.
As a profession, we are unanimous in our condemnation of the crime of abortion. Mere resolutions to this effect and nothing more are therefore useless, evasive, and cruel. If to want of knowledge on a medical point, the slaughter of countless children now steadily perpetrated in our midst is to be attributed, it is our duty as physicians and as good and true men, both publicly and privately, and by every means in our power, to enlighten this ignorance. If we have ever been thought negligent of the sanctity of fetal life, the means of correcting the error are before us.
Book. St. Louis University sociology professor, Dr. William Brennan, pointed out the following.
They had such an impact on the state legislatures that James Moore, in his book Abortion on America, called this the physicians' crusade against abortion from 1850s until 1880s. They were very clear. They said that human life begins at conception. It doesn't begin at quickening, it doesn't begin at viability, it begins at conception. And they reiterated this several times in both 1859 and 1881. Thou shalt not kill, they talked about. The innocent and helpless unborn children. They kept identifying the unborn child as the victim of abortion and not the woman. They repeat that time and time again. It's just amazing. They call abortion, 1871, a murder, a foul, unprovoked murder, and its blood, like the blood of Abel, will cry from earth to heaven for vengeance. I've never read anything more direct and graphic and strong anti-abortion statements, even today, than what the AMA indicated in 1859, 1871. All you have to do is read through this account.
Christians have now arrived at the unanimous opinion that the fetus in utero is alive from the very moment of conception. To extinguish the first spark of life is a crime of the same nature both against our Maker and society as to destroy an infant, a child, or a man. By that higher-than-human law, which, though scoffed at by many a tongue, is yet acknowledged by every conscience, the willful killing of a human being at any stage of its existence is murder.
And that last word is murder. I forgot one part here. I'm just going to summarize the 14th Amendment. When the 14th Amendment was written, the word human was a synonym for person. That's all we need to know, I think, about the 14th Amendment. And so I'm at the top of page 4. So the premise which Weddington promoted was false for a start. The AMA were very clear that life began at conception, and they identified the unborn child as the victim of abortion and not the woman. They refer to abortion as murder, even foul, unprovoked murder, comparing it to the blood of righteous Abel, crying out for vengeance. The doctors themselves campaigned, writing thousands of letters to their state legislatures saying that abortion was morally wrong. What caused this physicians' crusade against abortion? The development of microscopes, to the point that fertilization could be seen. And so with the knowledge that life began at conception, medical science moved out of the Dark Ages and into the Age of Enlightenment. How fascinating that in the 1850s they knew this, that life began at conception. The old adage that seeing is believing was responsible. But then we regressed and we lost it under the pounding of the abortion lobby. Interestingly, it is now that ultrasounds are available to show prospective parents their babies. I'm told that 9 out of 10 mothers, when shown ultrasounds, will not choose abortion. But of course, mothers are not being shown ultrasound by Planned Parenthood. Ben Shapiro, a journalist, was challenged the other day by a girl who said, "It's my body, and I can do what I like with it." And he answered this: "Actually, no, you cannot. We have laws in this country against taking drugs, against prostitution, against trespassing, even loitering. And if my left arm, which is a part of my body, wants to flail out and smack somebody, society tells me that I cannot do that." So this is a very widely believed fable. A choice for one means no choice, no life for the other. How did this happen? Eclipse of reason. So how did this happen? Simple answer: we were lied to. How did this gargantuan monster enter our society? Dr. Bernard Nathanson: "I am one of those who helped usher in this barbaric age. I worked hard to make abortion legal, affordable, and available on demand. I was one of the 3 founders of the National Rights Action League. I ran the largest abortion clinic in the United States, and as its director, I oversaw tens of thousands of abortions. I have performed thousands myself. How could this have happened? The edifice of abortion is built on a foundation of lies. Nathanson once not only told those lies, he helped to invent them. But he became converted to the pro-life cause, and while still as an atheist, he produced 2 documentary films, The Silent Scream, which energized the pro-life movement, and the second film, Eclipse of Reason, shows a 19-and-a-half-week-old baby being murdered. Nathanson's ultimate conclusion: abortion is an impermissible act of violence. The abortion lobby also gained much public support by arguing that tens of thousands of maternal deaths per year were due to criminal abortions that went wrong. Former abortionist, the same Dr. Bernard Nathanson, has subsequently stated that the 10,000 figure was essentially pulled out of thin air, since it sounded plausible and it made the desired point. According to Nathanson himself, he invented the lies, and then he told and sold the lies. As a young man, Nathanson arranged and funded his girlfriend's abortion. Much later, he referred to this as his introductory excursion into the satanic world of abortion. And I note that other authors have made this same connection between abortion and the evil one. In fact, they say anyone who can casually discuss tearing children to shreds while having lunch is a victim of the father of lies. Anyone who traffics in abortion loses a vital and beautiful spark of humanity. Nathanson and his friends lied relentlessly and spectacularly about the number of women who died each year from illegal abortions. Their pitch to voters, to you and me, lawmakers, judges, was that women were going to seek abortions in roughly equal numbers, whether it was lawful or not. The only effect of outlawing it, they claimed, is to limit pregnant women to unqualified and often uncaring practitioners, back alley butchers. These were self-confessed lies, but many, perhaps even most people, still believe them. We fed the public a line of deceit, dishonesty, a fabrication of statistics and figures. We succeeded because the time was right and the news media cooperated, apparently to the tune of 95% of the news media. We sensationalized the efforts of illegal abortions and fabricated polls which indicated that 85% of the public favored unrestricted abortion, when we knew it was only 5%. We unashamedly lied, and yet statements were quoted as though they had been written in law. I've attached Dr. Nathanson's Confessions of an Ex-Abortionist at the end of the paper. Abortion was packaged and sold to the public as a remedy for a terrible problem. It was presented as the only logical choice, a kind of neutral, and I would ask, when has neutral ever meant killing? A kind of neutral position. Our natural and reasonable feelings of compassion for someone in a very terrifying situation were exploited. After all, it was only tissue, and the overwhelming sentiments were for the poor girl or young woman whose life it would ruin. Add to that the myth of huge numbers being forced into back alleys, and you have a public assenting to killing multiple millions of its citizens. And so, all of the arguments that a mother might that might appeal to a mother thinking of abortion, if you consider financial hardship, inconvenience, stress, those arguments can be just as persuasively applied to a 2-year-old or even a teenager. So why don't we have the right to kill them? I'm going to skip down now to the last or next to the last paragraph. Let's look at the logic of this very commonly expressed opinion. I'm personally against abortion, but I'm still pro-choice. We shouldn't try to impose our views on others. First of all, to be pro-choice is to be pro-abortion. And I'm going off the paper now. Many people say, I'm not pro-abortion, but I am pro-choice. But how would you respond to someone who said, I'm not pro-robbery, I'm just pro-choice about robbery? In exactly the same way, To be pro-choice about abortion is to be pro-abortion. Some imagine that being personally opposed to abortion while believing others have the right to choose it is some kind of compromise between the pro-abortion and pro-life position. It isn't. To the baby who dies, it makes no difference whether those who refuse to protect her were pro-abortion or merely pro-choice about abortion. Being personally against abortion but favoring another's right to abortion is self-contradictory. It's exactly like saying, I'm personally against child abuse, but I defend my neighbor's right to abuse his child, if that is his choice. And what about the logic of killing an unwanted child? What would be most unfair to an unwanted child is to kill it. The problem of unwantedness is a good argument for wanting children, but a poor argument for exterminating them, eliminating them. How enormously twisted our thinking has become on these points. We have allowed the other side to frame the debate. To forbid birth is only quicker murder. He is a man who is to be a man. The fruit is always present in the seed. At the same time, the abortion lobby did a thorough job of making all who did not comply look like ignorant religious zealots, bigots, whose desire it was to remove freedom from others. I'll just skip over this next section. It's called the SLED test. SLED as in toboggan. And it is essentially saying that size is terribly important, that as it grows and as it develops, it will become a human. The fallacy here is that nothing becomes human which isn't human to begin with. Nothing non-human becomes human by getting bigger and older. Clip, please, 47 and 92. Let me just preface this by saying I very much want you to hear Sarah Weddington as she admits that if the unborn were a person, killing it would be the equivalent of killing a born child. And remember, it was on this basis that this sort of perverted thinking, it's on this basis that our law turns. So you will hear one of the justices, Justice Stewart, asking Sarah Weddington a question.
Well, if it were established that an unborn fetus is a person within the protection of the 14th Amendment, you would have almost an impossible case.
I would have a very difficult
Certainly would. But you'd have the same kind of thing. You'd have to say that this would be the equivalent to after a child was born. If the mother thought it bothered her health having a child around, she would have it killed. Is that correct?
Yet Weddington denies humanity to a human fetus in her book.
We stated further that the unborn fetus was not legally a human being, and that therefore killing a fetus was not murder or any other form of homicide. Homicide in Texas applied only to one who had been born. A fetus was not considered by the law equal to a human being. Sarah Weddington, A Question of Choice.
Biblically speaking, the case is almost too easy. Our mandate is to help the least of these, and in that way we do service to Jesus. How abhorrent is violence done to the helpless. And evil is praised throughout the land. In Luke 1:43, we actually have the Lord Jesus in the womb. It is from Scripture that we take the premise of the sanctity of life as a divine law. All human beings, even the handicapped and defenseless, are seen as individuals of value since they are made in the image of God. Abortion is hostility against God's creation. There are many, many scriptures in the footnotes. I would ask you to look at those later. And I would just add Ezekiel 35, verse 6, where we're told to hate evil and to hate bloodshed. What about the right to continue living? This is an amazing phrase. It speaks actually more sharply than the right to life. It is just this that is being denied a baby, the right to go on living. Randy Alcorn attended a pro-life rally and was, holding a poster of a picture of a baby in the womb. And he was approached by a student who said, "We know you photoshopped that. We know that's just tissue and cells. We know that's not real." She was programmed. She was conditioned not to believe reality. You can avoid reality, but you cannot avoid the consequences of avoiding reality. As long as people believe in absurdities, they will continue to commit atrocities. These next 2 points are key, as they come up all the time, and they're almost universally believed. While he was the Surgeon General, Dr. C. Everett Koop stated that in 36 years as a pediatric surgeon, he personally was not aware of a single situation in which a preborn child's life had to be taken in order to save the mother's life. To him, this extremely common pro-choice argument was nothing more than a smokescreen. Taken together, the three main pro-choice arguments used to justify abortion, the safety of the mother, rape and incest, and fetal abnormalities, amount to less than 5% of all abortions performed in the United States each year. And yet, they cause good people to assent to killing. Consider, please, the logic of killing a child who is the product of rape or incest. Does it not seem that the guilty party should be punished and not the innocent? And since when would abortion bring healing or comfort to a rape victim? And in the case of rape, look at how we've dealt with this. We already have one damaged individual. So what do we often advise? For the other individual, kill it. So then we have one damaged and one dead. And what about already born people who came to be because of rape? Are their lives less valuable? There are absolutely marvelous true stories of people who survived abortion and who were the result of rape and are wonderful and valuable people. America needs no words from me to see how your decision in Roe v. Wade has deformed a great nation. Another leading abortionist, Dr. Anthony Levatino, converted from being an abortionist doctor to pro-life. He says there's not a chance in hell that I would ever do another one. He reckons abortion to be one of the worst human rights violations in history. Texas, turn out the lights. Clip 83B, please, Carlos. 83B, please. And this is on your paper. It's on page 8 toward the bottom in quoting from.
And this new individual has never existed before and will never exist again. This has never been disputed. This is the big lie that the opposition have because they don't want it to be said that they're killing human beings.
And she goes on to say, so it's true that it's intellectual dishonesty. Ressler summarizes that there is no confusion among biologists as to when life begins, only among philosophers and politicians. In 1855, the Supreme Court decided that African slaves were not persons with the rights of citizens. In 1973, the Supreme Court decided that the unborn were not persons with the rights of citizens. That was the first one was known as the Dred Scott decision. And on the next page, I'll drop down to the paragraph just before the bold type. But ghastly as these decisions were, the fact that the Dred Scott decision was reversed has to give us hope. And why, I ask you, why is the idea of infanticide revolting and not the idea of killing in the womb? The idea of killing a 3-month-old child is absolutely revolting. Why is it less horrific to kill a 3-month-old in the womb? Every movement of oppression and exploitation has labeled itself, whether directly or indirectly, pro-choice. Either life is always and in all circumstances sacred, or intrinsically of no account. It is inconceivable that it should be in some cases the one and in some cases the other. I think Dr. Gerster's use of the word asinine is appropriate here, as she asks what magic happens at the moment of birth to turn what was not a person into a person. She says that's an asinine argument, because if it's a human being in the light of day, it's a human being in the darkness of the womb 30 minutes before. And I'm dropping down to the bottom of page 9. Randy Alcorn will not use pro-choice language because he says there's no such thing, that it's evasive and fraudulent. As he puts it, it's not about the choice, it's about what that choice is. The whole concept of choice is hailed as the highest good. But think about it. A pregnant woman does not have unlimited choices. She only has two, life or death. Clip, please, 93 and 94.
Dr. Brent, the terminology changes. If the child is wanted, the child is a human being. If the child is not wanted, the child is a fetus, protoplasm, what have you. Now, again, the same thing happened in the Third Reich. Why were they killed? Because they were unwanted. And what did they call them? Subhumans, waste products, what have you. And the same principle holds today. The terminology is twisted to justify and cover up the harsh realities of what happens to the victims. The euphemisms are medicalized. Here's a prime example. Joseph Fletcher, our prominent bioethicist who's no longer with us, said, pregnancy, when unwanted, is a disease, a venereal disease. Of course, this is what the Nazis said about the Jews. They referred to them as syphilis, venereal diseases. Okay? And what we were doing is, when we kill Jews, we are performing a public health service. Again, medical treatment, the medicalization of killing. If you can put it within the context of medicine, it gets all kinds of
Legitimacy is the last word there. Blacks didn't choose slavery. Jews didn't choose the ovens. Women don't choose rape. And babies don't choose abortion. These people are all victims. And I want to know, what about the victims' rights? These people were denied the right to choose. Abortion was sold as the gospel of choice. Choice has always been such a good thing. Who would not want a choice? Very few questioned what that choice was. The philosophy live and let live, or more accurately, live and let die, prevailed. Even those who thought they were against abortion bought the necessary evil paradigm. After all, we wouldn't want another child to grow up in poverty, would we? And haven't we swallowed that line to this very day? But Ressler points out a 19th century analogy in which a slave owner admits that there is something wrong, even evil, about slavery, but he still maintains that it's a necessary evil. This has, in fact, caused us to tolerate a culture of death. The flawed logic of a woman's right to choose creates an excuse that one can hide behind if one does not consider it too deeply. This slogan created a new abortion-on-demand orthodoxy. But what if the mother-to-be were to ask herself this: does the Constitution give me the right to say that my child must die? We, of course, as Christians, answer to a higher power. Women must have a choice. Some of our politicians even shriek this in their speeches. But what about the choice for the tiny little boys and the tiny little girls? You can have your own opinions, but you cannot have your own facts. The choice for one necessitates the loss of life for the other. How does having a choice compare with dismemberment, with the tearing of babies' limbs? I'm just dropping down, I'll summarize that next paragraph, but it's interesting just to remember what the doctors sign on to with a Hippocratic oath. I will maintain the utmost respect for human life from the time of its conception. Even under threat, I will not use my medical skill contrary to the laws of humanity. Okay, over the page. And just a point about location in that second paragraph. It's all about location. Inside the womb is dangerous. Outside, the law's on your side. The appalling logic of this is seen in looking at the situation of a scuba diver. Underwater, killing a scuba diver underwater is as immoral as killing that same individual when he's breathing on land. Dr. Jefferson believes that abortion will be reversed on an unborn child protection case. And of course, the states do have a compelling interest in protecting the lives of its children. Clip, please. 119 and 120.
Randy Alcorn.
People talk about, don't say I'm pro-abortion, just say I'm pro-choice. Well, in every other area, you can't say you're pro-choice. We have to talk about what choice is on the table. What choice are we discussing? Because if we're talking about whether you like Chinese food or Mexican food, everybody's pro-choice about that. What kind of car you drive, where you live, what kind of clothes you wear, things like that. We're pro-choice about those things. But we're not pro-choice about child abuse. We're not pro-choice about rape, kidnapping, theft. I mean, everything we've got a law against means we're not pro-choice about that thing.
Dr. William Brennan.
The most common euphemism invoked today to conceal the horrors of killing inside the womb is the word choice, and its derivatives, pro-choice, right to choose. Now, the Nazi doctors constructed a similar code word to cover up their horrendous atrocities, the term selection. The whole reason that Nazi Germany came to be is that some took it upon themselves to choose, to select who would live and who would die. The language of choice has become so predominant in the pro-abortion world that even the word abortion has been expunged from the pro-abortion lexicon. The right to choose, the right to select, constitute deplorable slogans. Beneath these democratic-sounding phrases is an especially hideous form of oppression. The right to choose, the right to select, to kill other human beings. Just as the Nazi doctors had the right to select who would expire in gas chambers, today's doctors, in conjunction with others, have the right to choose, to select who will perish in abortion clinics or...
Last word, hospitals. The crux of the matter, it is not a war on choice. It is a revulsion against killing. Every single evil thing that has ever been done by one individual to another is a choice. It is not a war on choice, it is being honest with what that choice is. The choice to end life, which in all other circumstances we call murder, or to allow life to continue. The sin of silence. To ignore evil is to become an accomplice to it. When we say nothing at all, we are still saying something, or has been said. I used to think if I didn't say anything, I wasn't saying anything. Now I know better. When we don't speak, our silence speaks for us. The question should be, do you think people should have the right to choose to kill children? We too have known the evil from its start in this great nation where for 43 long years the innocent unborn have been slaughtered. We have grown accustomed to the killing and have gone on with our business, with our lives, and with our ministries, while the little ones have perished. Every day, about 3,700. This is what we've come to in America. The Supreme Court of our land, and I know it's now illegal, had questioned at that time the horror of partial birth abortion, this most barbaric and grotesque killing of a child in the midst of its birth. And yet, even in the face of this abomination, the churches of America, the pastors of America, are silent. Where is the cry of outrage? Where's the indignation of the people of God? We too have known the evil from the start. Body parts being trafficked stand in mute testimony to our failure and to our guilt, which is to say that churches have had very little, if any, influence on the behavior of their members. If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. Clip 336, please.
Dr. Brandon.
This is a perversion of the first order because it exploits the language of rights as a pretext for taking away the most fundamental right to life itself. It is an arrogant, elitist assumption of the awesome power to destroy those who cannot defend themselves. An extreme manifestation of the strong victimizing the helpless. It is also a blatant sham because the victims, the ones most drastically affected, are the very ones who do not have the right to select or choose. It is death at someone else's selection or choice. This is not freedom, but the worst kind of tyranny.
There is a 1-minute testimony. I won't take the time to go over it, but it's very interesting. Please have a look at it later. It is a poverty to decide that a child must die so that you may live as you wish. Could anything be clearer? This unspeakable homicide, this scourge on the conscience of the nation, this Holocaust of the unborn surely is the darkest chapter in our history. Abortion has led us into complete moral subjectivism in which we are prone to justify as ethical whatever it is we want to do. Abortion should be viewed as unthinkable, immoral, a violation of our every natural sentiment. Destroying our own progeny is godless, a morally repugnant extermination of innocence. May God work with us in both fact and emotion to cause the appropriate response. The unborn are human, just like you and me, and that is why killing them is wrong. A counselor who has spoken to countless thousands of women has said that he has never heard anyone say that they are sorry to have given birth, but he has heard thousands upon thousands of heart-wrenching stories, pitiful regrets by women who have had abortions. Morality cannot be legislated, but behavior can be regulated. Judicial decrees may not change the heart, but they can restrain the heartless. Do not be fooled by the jargon. No, it's not a question of choice. It's a question of killing. We have to face this reality. In a time of universal deceit, telling the truth becomes a revolutionary act. How totally incredible it is that although we have everything on our side, we have science, we have biology, we have medicine and psychology, we have theology, we have technology and visuals, and we have legal history, as well as passionate testimony by doctors and mothers who have had abortions. And yet, we have been railroaded into this. Evil has been victorious to the tune of nearly 60 million lives. And now for the good news. You deserve some good news. We must oppose this culture of death, and it is a blessed thing to do so. To stand and be hated and to return love and prayers is a holy activity. I'm referring now to being at a pro-life rally or perhaps even at an anti-abortion protest. All of those, here's the good news, all of those dedicated to abortion are possible allies, and they could be won for the cause of life. And more good news. 50% of the American public are apparently on the fence on this issue. And that means they can be spoken to, reasoned with, and persuaded. And it means that we might have opportunities to save lives. Mere waiting and looking on is not Christian behavior. Christians are called to compassion and action. Please engage. Please be challenged and challenge others. Again, this is our war. We must take up the cross on behalf of the innocent and defenseless. It's past time for boots on the ground. There was a 750,000 strong pro-life rally recently in Lima, Peru. Why is it so quiet here? Have the courage, as Justice Scalia said, have the courage to have your wisdom regarded as stupidity. Be fools for Christ, and have the courage to suffer the contempt of the sophisticated world. Abortion is always wrong because it is always killing. Knowing these things has changed me. Please don't let this information die in this room. The only value that it has is outside this room. Perhaps this will resonate with you as it has with me. I can no longer accept the things I cannot change. I can try to change the things I cannot accept. That's it. Thank you.